All right, welcome back. We have with us again attorney Dan Lust from the Conduct Detrimental podcast to talk to us about the newest, one of many investigations and now actual lawsuit against not only Dan Snyder, but against the Washington football team, the NFL, and who we know should face perjury charges, Roger Goodell. So this is a new lawsuit facing all of those defendants, brought on by the the District of Columbia Attorney General. And so, Dan, what's going on here?
Yeah, Doug's another week, another Dan Snyder saga. We've you and I have been now talking for a couple weeks. We did kind of flag that there were 3 state pending investigations in the Attorney General's office. We've said that these investigations could be anywhere from toxic workplace-based investigations to consumer fraud to these financial improprieties. Last week, we talked about the opening of a federal investigation in the Attorney General's office in the District of Virginia. So the update this week is that one of those 3 states in the DMV area, be it the District of Columbia, has announced not just that they have started an investigation, which we've known since April, but they have, at least in some sense, concluded their investigation and launched an actual civil lawsuit, Doug's, you named it, against Dan Snyder, the Commanders, Roger Goodell, as well as the NFL. So we can certainly unpack it, but it's an allegation really for the return of financial harm that was done to the consumers in DC. I'm not exactly sure how strong this lawsuit is, but certainly the optics of suing, in addition to, again, Snyder and the Commanders, suing Roger Goodell in the NFL. I mean, I'm not aware of an Attorney General's office suing a sports team before, ever. I'm certainly not aware of them suing a league and a commissioner. So it is kind of an unprecedented lawsuit in that sense.
Yeah, and it just came out. It was last week. It was the District of Columbia Attorney General. I'm going to go ahead and say it, and I hate that they're putting me in this position because I do not want to defend Dan Snyder, but this sounds like a big grab for attention. I did hear he's leaving office soon. I know they've been doing this investigation into what the apparent or alleged damages or harm are, but it sounds like this. It sounds like he just wants to be in the spotlight. I had to listen to the press conference over and over again. That's probably the first thing. He had a press conference for this. He announced early, he didn't just file the civil lawsuit and then, hey, it's been announced by the AG. It's like, no, he had a whole press conference. Kind of seemed very grandstandy. And he came out and he used very specific words. And I just want to I had to write them down. He said that there is very real and serious harm, those are the quotes, very real and serious harm done to the residents based on Dan Snyder lying to the public, allegedly lying to the public about his acknowledgement or his knowing that there was a toxic workplace for as far as the football team and the cheerleaders and everything. I mean, so he's suing someone in Washington, D.C. for lying to the public. I memean, if we're doing that, I've got about 535 lawsuits I need to file right now.
Listen, we'll call a spade, right? Like, I am not one, and Doug's, in our conversations, I think me as not really a political guy by any means, but people can accuse someone of making kind of like, jumping on a political soapbox or grandstanding. The nature of this case is about lying to the public, and it's about lying to the public specifically here about this toxic workplace investigation. So I guess maybe a little bit of trip down like memory lane when it comes to this particular case. Hashtag release the report. It trends every couple weeks on Twitter. People want this Beth Wilkinson report out. So what was it? From I think it was July of 2020 till October of 2021, Dan Snyder hired an attorney by the name of Beth Wilkinson, her law firm, to kind of conduct one of those them in college basketball, college football, like a self investigation, like we're self-reporting, we're going to figure this thing out. So I'm always a little bit suspicious about that in sports when a team like, hey, we're going to investigate ourselves here, everyone relax. A week or maybe a month or 2 had passed after this self-investigation had started, and then another allegation came out about Dan Snyder. So at that point, Roger Goodell and the NFL took control of that investigation, and they said, you know what, that's it, Snyder, you don't get to do this on your own. We're going to take control. Doug's, I have a question. Don't you think probably best practices in having an independent investigation would be firing that first lawyer and hiring a new lawyer? What do you think?
Yeah, I would say so.
What if I told you that the NFL and Roger Goodell did not fire that lawyer? They actually kept on Dan Snyder's handpicked attorney. So, Dan Snyder at one point picked this person. You would think that they had some allegiance toward Dan Snyder. And in fact, Beth Wilkinson continued on for that case for another about 15 months, again, until October of 2021. So when that was done, Doug's in the history of sports, we have the Mitchell report, the big steroids report, pages and pages dedicated to it. You could talk about the Deflategate report with Tom Brady, pages and pages. Those are player-based investigations, right? They are not an allegation based into a particular owner, right? We didn't have like the Bob Kraft report with whatever was going on at the massage parlors with him. Allegedly, I guess we could say allegedly. But here, I think there is some suspicion drawn where you don't have this written report. You have a verbal report that's told, I think, orally to the NFL. So that's kind of where the question comes up. Was this report truly independent? Was it not? Or did the NFL run some type of cover up in a sense to protect, the Commanders and Snyder from the public finding this out? So in theory, in a large vacuum, do we think the investigation was truly independent? No, I truly don't. I'm sure most people don't. But there's still a question, right? Did the NFL do something wrong? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But is that really sufficient to form a lawsuit? The lawsuit here is based off whether there was some big collusive effort between the league and Snyder to kind of hide this from the public. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. But how much financial harm is caused by that? I think that's maybe an answerable question. One the AG does not have an answer to. I watched the same press conference you did, and he said, I think he said to a reporter, like, hey, you take out your calculator, I'll take out mine, and we'll figure this thing out. Like, no, you kind of have to have that answer. The civil lawsuit's based on monetary damages. You kind of have to, you don't have to for the filing, but if you're going to go through this big press conference and this big Twitter thread, you kind of have to know that answer. That's the answer people are looking for. And I certainly wasn't, I wasn't okay with the way he answered that.
Yeah. And so again, the monetary damages, what is that number? It sounds like he doesn't know. And even then, what could be the monetary damages of an owner, again, because it's colluding for an investigation and it's based off of findings that we don't even know. And it's, as far as Dan Snyder lying to the public, again, as far as the attorney goes, that's been my outlook is, even if there is an appearance of collusion, or if there's an appearance that there may be a conflict, you just, you recuse yourself. That's just the big issue there. But even so, this is a civil lawsuit. If I remember correctly, now I took a business law school at FCCJ, the community college, before I even went to FSU. So I'm pretty familiar with tort law. There has to be some kind of agreement, right? There has to be like, hey, listen, I will do this, you will do that. There has to be an agreement there. And then there has to be actual damages. So what is the agreement that was made between Dan Snyder and the DC residents that he has, not held his end up?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, again, I guess at a certain point, what are the Commanders selling? They're selling tickets, they're selling merchandise. And I think what the AG's point here, and again, not to take the AG side in this, but at a certain point, as an entity that's kind of public facing, right, that's selling something to the public, you have to be upfront and honest about that particular product. Now, do I think that Snyder's involvement in the investigation is the same thing as a true unfair trade practice, as is kind of alleged here? In like misleading consumers, right? If you say that a particular like 4th of July firework, let's say, won't blow your hand up, and it blows your hand up, maybe that's more of a problem, right? But what's being alleged here, if it's very specific, and Doug, you keep saying this term like lying to the public. What's really interesting about this Attorney General's lawsuit is that I'm just going to read one of the clauses. It says, between the NFL and Snyder and the Commanders and Goodell, right, using ambiguity with respect to material facts regarding Snyder's and team management. So he's not just saying that like Snyder lied. It's like, hey, you were being ambiguous about what you said. You failed to disclose material facts. And then the third one is misrepresenting, which is closer to a lie. So if you felt weird about like lying to the public should create a private cause of action, how about this one, right? Like being ambiguous in your answer and being confusing. How about every debate we've ever watched in politics? Like, I don't understand half a word that these people are saying because they all talk in circles. It's all circuitous. They just kind of grandstand for, and filibuster for 2 minutes and without really saying anything. If that can create the basis of a lawsuit, like, the floodgates are certainly open. That's where I do think at a certain point, again, I see the comments just like I'm sure you do, but there is parts of this lawsuit that are form over substance. If you don't know how much your constituency was harmed financially, if you don't know the answer to that question, I'm not sure how we're going to calculate that. We're going to poll everybody and say, how many tickets did you buy? Did you believe that Snyder was telling the truth at that point in time? Okay, how much did you buy? I'm sure we can figure out, at least get close to the answer to that. But in our world, right, this is very speculative damages. So I'm surprised that this was the lawsuit that was brought. Not that the Attorney General's office, I'm surprised that they did something because they've been investigating this since April. But I'm surprised that this was the final product. It kind of begs the question, like, what was the rush, right? Like, why did you need to put this out in the middle of November? I'm not sure of that answer.
Yeah, especially when there are other, I'll say, real investigations or real possible lawsuits coming where the damages may actually be known. And that goes, the ambiguity part. So again, he's bringing up not necessarily that he lied, but that he was ambiguous, that he was, truth, some. When it comes to that kind of thing, I even have to go one step further. Could a court say, even though he was being ambiguous, again, you brought up, what person is out there saying, you know what, Dan Snyder, I believe Dan Snyder, therefore I will buy a ticket to next week's game. Therefore, I will buy this Washington football team jacket to, portray myself as a fan. Even then, the ambiguity part, if the court can somehow, or if Dan Snyder and the NFL can somehow say, listen, even though that is the issue, it's kind of a known thing that you shouldn't trust Dan Snyder. He has a history of this. If they can prove that the public shouldn't even have that mentality of they should trust him, does that negate that at all?
Yes and no. I keep kind of defaulting to the fact that, like, this didn't need to happen, right? You could have had a lawsuit that's based on true consumer fraud. We've talked about allegations about, like, millions in season ticket deductibles being kept by the team, allegedly, we'll say allegedly there, alleged revenue stealing, revenue sharing improprieties between NFL owners or between Snyder and the NFL. I'm with you, right? Like, this particular aspect, like the where is the written report from Beth Wilkinson? It seems to me, right, that this seems to be a lawsuit geared towards getting discovery, right? And I think the AG was like, we want to hold everyone accountable. So you want to hold people accountable, right? Like, take depositions of these people and get their cell phone records. Like, okay, I guess I understand that, but there's a concept in our law, Doug's, called a fishing expedition. You can't just, like, have some loose understanding. Like, maybe if we dig across someone's forensic footprint, we'll find something here. You need to kind of have some form of good faith basis to start a lawsuit. So, any lawsuit that's seeking monetary damages, obviously you have to show a duty, right? And some type of breach of that duty with respect to, the consuming public, but you kind of have to show damages. So I don't know. I just was kind of uncomfortable with the time frame of when this thing is filed. You have the 3 pending investigations at the federal level, 1 at the federal level, and now 2 more with Virginia and Maryland. And I'm like, I don't know, did the AG's office in DC just rush to be the first one to file their lawsuit? Maybe would have been better off waiting for, one of the more serious consumer fraud allegations. I'm not sure how many people, Doug, to your point, were like, hey, I believed Dan Snyder that he said, honestly, he looked me in the eye and I read his statements that he truthfully did not know anything about this investigation. And then I re-upped my season ticket package. How many of those people exist? I'd imagine not that many.
Yeah. It wouldn't make sense to me. That's for sure. Because again, that person would have to say, I believe Dan Snyder. So, like, I don't know if I believe someone who says they believe Dan Snyder.
In particular, and we didn't talk about this. Did you see the statement made about Brian Robinson that came out in the heart of all this?
I didn't.
Brian Robinson, running back for the Commanders, obviously had his attempted murder incident that happened earlier this year. So in the middle of the statement, they write a crazy statement from Dan Snyder. It's like, maybe one of the worst statements that's ever been written by an organization. And I say written by Dan Snyder because you'd think Snyder's pulling the strings, because no actual PR person would ever truly write this with their own free will, I would think. But that the Washington was dealing with this shooting incident. The AG should be caring about other things. I'm like, hold on, well, let's not hide the ball here. Like, let's stick to it. So you and I are here trying to at least, in a very tepid sense, maybe give Dan Snyder some defense here. Like, hey, this particular lawsuit we're not necessarily buying into. He does himself no favors with these statements. I mean, it's just a horrendous look.
Yeah, there's no reason. It's almost when you're not taking a side, but you're like, hey, listen, I'm with you on this point, and then he just goes over the top, and you're like, well, I'm trying to help you a little bit. Like, let me help you. Help me help you. And so yeah, it's tough when I do remember that. It's tough when that happens. So you brought up a fishing, this could be a fishing expedition. And that sounds like, I mean, if you watched the press conference that he had, it sounds like that was the, at least intent of this. He brought that up about, especially near the end, about how he wants, discovery. He wants these, statements on record from Roger Goodell in the NFL. And it sounds like that is really the intent of this. If a judge, so going, let's, basically say this is going to go in front of a judge. I don't know the legal definition of basically dismissing this, but what are the odds that a judge dismisses this? One, because they see that's what this is. Listen, I understand you want information from Roger Goodell in the NFL. This isn't how you do it. And two, going back to what are the actual damages? I know there's been, there's been judges that have determined, hey, these damages don't add up to what is required for a federal lawsuit, so I'm kicking it down to the state level. Can the same thing happen here, where a judge sees this and goes, listen, you're not telling me what the damages are, and we're just going to cut it off here, and I'm going to dismiss this?
I mean, I kind of alluded to this early on. You don't, for legal filing, you don't need to have like an itemized set of damages early on, right? You don't actually need to put in a written, in any type of civil complaint or anything like that. You don't need to actually have a set amount of damages. You are allowed to conduct discovery and figure that out. You just need to allege enough that, say, plausibly you could get through the door. Once you have ample discovery, I don't think that's going to stop the NFL, Dan Snyder and the Commanders, from filing motions to dismiss early on in the case and saying, hey, there is nothing here. There is not enough, even today, as we sit here, to plausibly say that they can connect the dots. It's not really from point A to point B. Doug's, let's say you get into a car accident, right? And let's say Frank the Tank is driving his Mercedes. What does Frank the Tank drive?
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's say he rear ends you in the back and you want to sue Frank the Tank. Like, you don't have to put in the complaint, like, hey, I was damaged in the amount of $4,200,036. You can figure it out. And also, like, the case is still kind of ongoing, right? Those potential damages that you might be suffering as like a personal injury case. But with our, Commander's case, you might say, like, hey, this deceit from Dan Snyder is continuing. It's ongoing. We still don't have that particular report. The NFL had to hire a second law firm to conduct a kind of cleanup investigation. So we still don't know how many kind of falsities or interference was run by Dan Snyder with respect to that first report. So we don't yet know the full extent of damages. And Doug, to the point you made really early on in this, in our chat today, like, we don't really know what Dan Snyder was found to have committed that resulted in a $10 million fine against the team, and him being told to stay away from day-to-day operations of the team. So, again, right, some of this stuff, right, the truth is going to be an absolute defense. We don't yet know if Dan Snyder truthfully did not, there's a world, right? I think Dan Snyder, I've seen this, and someone can correct us, but I don't think Dan Snyder has an email. Like, I think Dan Snyder is one of these guys who just downstreams everything, and he's like not, it seems from all intents and purposes, not that involved in the day-to-day stuff. So if you told me that Dan Snyder just like didn't know about some of these things, like, I could see it. He doesn't seem like he's got his other business ventures that he's out there. So I don't know, as we sit here, sure. Could they come up with the damages amount? Yeah. But I mean, I'm looking at this lawsuit's filed in November of 2022. If you really go through this complaint and you really try to figure out, Doug's, like, what is new, what is old, this is really a lawsuit that could have been filed based on what they knew here, I don't know, months ago. There's nothing really new in here. So that's why I keep deferring towards this being a little form of grandstanding. And all of the, hey, we have a big announcement tomorrow. Here's our press conference. Here's my Twitter feed. At no point does the AG tell you, hey, we've known about all this stuff for a couple months. Hey, the public knew about this. We all knew about it. We just sat on our hands for a couple months trying to get this thing together. So this is really that investigation from July of 2020 to October of 2021, that 15-month period. So what have we really learned that was new since October of 2021? Like maybe possibly Dan Snyder was a little bit ambiguous about it. Like we can do better. We can do better than that from a legal and a lawsuit perspective.
Yeah. And so, and that basically wraps it up. I mean, he seems to be very ambiguous with everything as far as this lawsuit. So
maybe there's going to be a lawsuit against him, Doug. How about that? He's being pretty ambiguous. Again, I hate that he's putting me in a position where I feel inclined to defend Dan Snyder. That's not a great feeling, thinking like, hey, I need to, but it's just in order for myself to feel fair on all sides, because that's what at the end of the day, that's what I want to be. I want to be fair and just and everything. And I don't see myself going along with this, even if I do want the outcome. Listen, I would love to hear a deposition. I would love to hear discovery from Roger Goodell. And especially if it came up, hey, did you lie under oath when you said you didn't know who Dave Portnoy? I want that. I would love to see that. I'm sure it'd be great content. I'm sure we'd make multiple videos about it. But not like this. Not if this is how you're going about it. And it sounds like he's being ambiguous. I don't think Dan Snyder has any duty as far as the owner to not be ambiguous. And listen, as a Jaguars fan, if I can file a civil lawsuit against Shad Khan for saying he wants a good football team, but then doing the same thing season after season, even though it doesn't work, I'll file that tomorrow if this win. I mean, if this, it sounds like a lot of malarkey, a lot of balderdash, but we'll see where it goes. Yeah, we'll obviously keep tabs on it. We'll see that inevitable Urban Meyer investigation. We'll see if your Jaguars get brought in based on what they knew, what they didn't know. He's the future of the organization, and he's gone in 1 year. Doug, it sounds a little bit suspicious. So maybe there's an investigation looming over there.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. The Dan Snyder saga continues. Dan Lust, I appreciate it. Again, check Dan Lust out on Conduct Detrimental, his podcast. Dan, you got anything coming out soon?
Doug's, how about this? I am speaking at the Harvard Law School in about 2 weeks. So sometimes you get some big people on your show here. Yours truly get the invite to speak at Harvard. So we're talking a little bit of NIL, a little bit of Washington Commanders. So never a dull moment in sports. So certainly happy to be at the forefront of it. Yeah,
congratulations. That's very cool. You're hitting Harvard, hitting Barstool. You're covering the whole spectrum here.
I'll take it. I'll certainly take it. I'm not sure how that happened, but we'll not going to object to anything like that.
You take the wins when you can get them. Well, I appreciate it. And listen, it's Dan Snyder. I'm sure we'll have some new news coming out real soon. Thanks for watching. See you next time.